Okay, welcome to the emergency preparedness session. This is very condensed. There is so much information, but hopefully it will get your thinking bubbles going and you'll be able to expand on what I've said today with more information that you'll be sent later. So to quote Benjamin Franklin, and this was a quote that our prep manager used when we did the project, failure to plan is a plan to fail. So think about that. Um, we don't often think of ourselves as failing, but when you're faced with an emergency, you need to know that you can handle yourself confidently and safely to be able to manage for however long you're going to be stuck in that situation. So, questions to ask ourselves: how prepared is your household for a major emergency or disaster as of today? How much of a priority is it to take care of yourself and your loved ones if something were to happen? And according to the survey that we launched when we started the project and the focus groups that we held to give us more information to figure out what we would research to deliver in workshops, many of us haven't given it much thought. So you need to remember that the government won't have supplies for everyone. And after a disaster, many of the services you use, such as electricity, gas, being able to use your cell phone, and all of those things, they may not be available for a long period of time. How will you manage? So going forward, it's important that you understand what we talk about today. These are just ideas and things that we can think of to suggest how you're going to be better prepared, but you really need to know that there isn't one recipe that fits everyone here. All of you have different unique situations, and this is why we encourage everyone to have their own unique plan or plan for your family. For instance, if you and your spouse are at home, your children, you have a pet or a guide dog. So all plans here would be unique to all of you who decide to create one in the event of an emergency. Now, one of the things, and the reason I always mention this to make sure that you need to be able to realize, I don't have all the answers just because we've delved into a lot of this information. Someone had asked me at one point, wow, I live on the 8th floor of in a condo building. How will I get down the stairs? I don't do stairs very well. And so what I said to her is, this is the kind of thing that you need to plan for. You're going to need to figure out how you can get some help, prepare for it so that if an emergency happens, someone you've chosen, a neighbor or somebody, would come and assist you in whatever way works best for you. There is no one simple answer. Okay. Now, to start all of this, to think about preparation, it's probably very overwhelming. So start taking stock of your skills, first of all. What skills will you have to use to be able to get yourself into a safe situation if there was an emergency or a disaster? What supplies you already have? You'd be surprised. Go around your home and look for things that you could put away in a bin or a bag or something that you could say, I will need this when we have an emergency. You might be more prepared than you think. The resiliency that we muster to go about our everyday lives is quite, it is a lot more, has a lot more strength than we realize. If all of this seems overwhelming, just do it a little bit at a time. So when you walk away today and after I send you the plan, how to create your own unique emergency plan, do it a little bit at a time. You don't have to do everything all in one day. It will be important to update your supplies in, your emergency supplies regularly. There are things that have expiry dates, such as medication or maybe even food, although you would certainly have canned food, which if someone said to you tomorrow, there's the expiry date of this can, it doesn't mean you throw it in garbage. It's just something you don't want to leave there maybe for another 6 months to a year. We'll go over the plan in the last section and the list of supplies. So I'll take you through the plan really quickly. We also have a tip sheet on how to complete the plan, just in case there are questions in there you may not understand, or you want to know why we suggested certain things. There'll be tips on how to complete the plan. All of these documents, by the way, are in Word format, very easy to navigate through. The emergency plan is a working document. You can add to it. You can delete things that don't apply to you and never will, so that you only have what you need. So once we did our survey to kind of find out how prepared people were to face an emergency, we realized there was a lot of work to do. For some people, they've just never really given it much thought. Some of them actually said they didn't really care. Whatever happens, happens. And that could be a quote if I was willing to do that. And so some of those things were a little bit shocking to us, because you really need to know that you can manage when it happens. And when it happens quickly. And we want to be able to know that we've done the right thing, and that hopefully at the end of it all, we won't be so afraid, because there were, some of the things that were revealed in the focus group. There were people who were genuinely afraid what will happen when there's an emergency. And at this point, I just want to remind everyone why we decided to do this project. And I will credit Linda Bartram, our first vice president, who decided after the Rogers outage one summer, it only lasted a day, and I can't imagine how it would have, it may have lasted longer for certain people in different provinces, but for most of us, it lasted a day. How will you purchase things that you need? You couldn't use the internet. There were so many things that were involved with the fact that you couldn't use a cell phone or your computer with the internet to find out things. You couldn't make a purchase for food. You couldn't make a purchase for medication. Those are important things. There probably were so many other little things that we could do without, but that particular outage caused a lot of people a lot of trouble, especially if you were a business trying to, work out through the day. Having cash on hand would have been a good thing, but now the bank is involved in not being able to operate because it uses Rogers as a provider. So Linda decided that we should submit a proposal to Disability Alliance BC, who handles the dissemination of grants from the provincial government for different projects that are worthy of this money. And we were successful in our proposal. So that was the reason that we kind of went ahead with it, and it brought out so many different things that we weren't anticipating. So the focus groups revealed that when we asked people what their biggest fears were regarding emergencies, if someone could mute, please, whoever you are, that would be helpful. The biggest fears, and someone is still unmuted with noise in the background, please. The biggest fears that people had were home fires, earthquakes, flight emergencies, being separated from children or family members. How would you connect with your family members later to tell them you're okay? Some worried they would freeze if it was really cold and they were so unprepared. So earthquakes were definitely a big worry for some, and we'll talk a little bit later about the new early earthquake warning system that apparently started in the spring for BC and will be live in Ontario and Quebec, as all those three provinces are higher risk for earthquakes. We'll go over that a little bit more later. There was someone who shared an experience about why they were scared of home fires, because we concentrate a lot on wildfires. I'm someone who lives in Kelowna. There are definitely wildfires every summer. You just don't go a summer without something happening, and it actually happened to us a couple summers ago, where we needed to evacuate for several days. And let me tell you, no matter how we thought we might have been prepared, we weren't prepared enough. So one person in the focus group, just to give you an idea and why we're doing this session, so that blind people can sort of understand what would happen if this, and this were to be a reality. This person had to be woken up in the night because there was fire at his home on the porch. It hadn't entered the home yet, but he had to be woken up to let him know that there was fire. Now, being blind, totally blind, this person said it was so frightening. There wasn't too much water damage, but he kind of had no idea where to go, what to do first. Although by that time there was assistance of the fire department to help make sure that he came to safety. Orienting yourself as a blind person is very stressful if you don't know right away where the emergency is happening or how serious it is. What this person also pointed out was it's good to know where to exit, but one day, I guess, during a fire alarm, he did know where to exit. What he didn't know is that some doors don't have handles on both sides. They are simply crash doors that you can get out of, and I'm sure we've all seen them, but there's no handle on the other side to get back in. It's meant to get you out, not to get you back in. So you should really be aware of your surroundings and how it works once you get out, where to go from there, or could you get back in if you had to. There were questions sort of such as, how do I exit safely when I don't know where the problem is? So if there was an earthquake, let's say, and there was a lot of debris, and you could be outside, you could be anywhere, how do you know where you're going to step and be safe? Whether you have the help of a white cane or a dog, or it doesn't matter. How do you know where to go if you don't know how to exit safely? There are things you can do, and we'll go over that a bit later. We asked how, if people had searched for emergency information, emergency preparedness information at all. And many had not. And some said that they had searched for different things, but the problem became there are many sites that offer information, but throughout their site, they put up pictures, they scan documents that all of a sudden, you got a little tidbit of information at the top, but in the middle somewhere, now you can't anymore because your screen reader won't read the fact that there's an image there. And so what the hope would be at some point is that government or whoever puts up these websites would keep in mind that blind people need to read these and that they should all be fully accessible. So what we tried to do is we did put a list of resources on our website that were accessible. There were a few people who attended our workshops or focus groups that said, I can manage to read a PDF because I do have a bit of sight. This is something that I do, certainly. I do have some sight. So if I think it's something I really want to read, I am able to turn off the voiceover on my phone, let's say, and make the writing a little bigger. But not everyone has that opportunity. And so we provided a couple of links that may say that there are PDFs there, but it's also there for those who are able to read it. So we tried to have a little something for everyone, however they manage to get the information. And something that dawned on me while during the project as well, but certainly this past week, as I went looking for more information, it seems to me that since the I know we had a big atmospheric river in 2021, which caused a lot of flooding problems in BC, certainly, and I'm sure other provinces have had the same experiences. Seems to me more people are very conscious of emergency preparedness now, as this is why we're all here today, I imagine, because I seem to find more information now than I did when we contemplated the project. And certainly maybe more Canadian information. That was another thing that some people recognized, is that although some other information may be quite appropriate, but you kind of like to hear from your own government. You don't have to be reading about what people in the US are doing. If, somewhere in Ontario, they should be reporting the same. So if people weren't able to find what they needed from the internet when they were researching, they gave up. And that's the end of their thought to emergency preparedness. And that's kind of sad. It brought a lot of questions to the forefront. So okay. So we really tried to go through some of the things that people were doing at the time, and brought out a little more. They gave us a lot of good ideas, such as, did you know that your smoke alarms, your smoke detectors, they should be cleaned once in a while. Not only just do you change the batteries, but they could, if you have a pet, if you have a guide dog, they could be full of dog hair. You'd be surprised where all of that dust and stuff hangs on to. And sometimes if they are not clean enough, they will trigger the alarm to go on or beep or whatever. And it's important to maintain all of those things, because we never know when we might need them. And recently in my own home, we have several detectors. We have a big home, so there's one in just about every room of the house and then some. One detector became faulty, and one night, it was about 3:15 or so in the morning, in the middle of the night, all alarms went off. Well, there's four of us who live here. There's a dog, and I'm telling you that it didn't take us long to all at least be in the foyer trying to figure out what's going on. We can't find anywhere that there might be fire or anything like that. All it was is that there's one alarm that's faulty and it needed to be changed right away. So we disconnected that one particular alarm, and during the day we changed all batteries and looked after that. So those are things that we need to remember to do. I will pause here for some questions if there are any.
Okay, let me just see if we have any hands. No hands yet. No, still no hands. You're muted, Chantel.
I have no idea how I did that. Okay, so we'll move forward if there are no questions now, and just raise your hand if you do have one at some point. The second part of this presentation is dealing with a few highlights from the 2 workshops that we had, which were 2.5 hours. So 5 hours worth of information condensed in a few minutes here. And as I said, some things I won't elaborate on because I am not an expert in those things, such as we had an earthquake seismologist. We had a seismologist from the federal government. She presented first and on everything to do with earthquakes. And she told us that, you know, since this is what she does for a living, she lives it and breathes it. She says her car is full of emergency preparedness things and she thinks about it all the time. Now that's sounds a little bit daunting, but it certainly makes a person very aware of the things that could happen. And you know, hence they are prepared for in any of those events. She told us about the earthquake early warning system, which will sound alarms. It's designed to detect earthquakes as in real time, rapid detection within seconds. So depending on how far or how close the earthquake would be to you, you may have, she told us, maybe 60 seconds. Your alarm would sound, or apparently it's hooked up to the same type of system with our cell phones for sure. And I'll let you investigate the rest as to how it's all going to work. But so your cell phone's going to ring or buzz or whatever it's going to do. And apparently the earthquake preparedness sounding would supersede anything. We often talk about the alarms that come on for things like Amber Alerts. Apparently, if you turn off if you put your phone on silent, I think that alarm won't sound. But from what we were told during the presentation, you couldn't turn off the alarm for earthquake. So when there's going to be an earthquake in the area where you are, there would be a few seconds, but nevertheless, you would at least have a warning that something's going to happen. Then you could try to get yourself to safety. However it is you need to do that. Drop, cover, and hold. And we also were told, it was explained to us that previous protocol, do you remember when you were young, maybe people told you should go into the door frame of a doorway and you would be safe there? Apparently that is not so. Buildings aren't constructed the way they used to be, and now they recommend you go under something heavy, so under a heavy piece of furniture or tucked away somewhere with, pillows on the back of your neck so that you don't, hopefully you wouldn't injure your head. And again, I am not an expert in this, so I will let you read about it and figure out where this information is so that you can best equip yourself to find out how you would drop, cover, and hold and where you would do it. So Natural Resources Canada are the people who have designed the early warning system. And apparently the moderate to high earthquake are concentrated in Western British Columbia, Eastern Ontario, and in Quebec. So the system began operation in the spring of 2024 in British Columbia and should be operational in Ontario in early 2025 in Quebec. The speaker we had informed us that we have a very strong building code in Canada, much like in California. So the modern buildings are designed to withstand strong shaking. People in North American style architectures are not generally injured, she said, by, this type of thing now, because the buildings are a little more sturdy, but they could experience falling debris depending on how you are set up in your home, or if you're outside, where you are you in a mall somewhere, we just don't know. But we had a long presentation on how you could prevent some of that from happening. Make sure that you have heavy items on the bottom shelves of whatever it is you have in your home rather than at the top. Because things shift during an earthquake, however little, however inconsequential it might be to some of us. I'm pretty sure many of us have felt little tremors, and if you can feel them or even hear a little bit of rattling somewhere, any of that could have fallen and broken, and then you have to deal with, whatever consequences that caused. Earthquakes don't happen on their own. They can trigger landslides, slumping, and liquefaction. Now, it can cause buildings to tilt and sink, and then they become inhabitable. Liquefaction happens when loosely packed, waterlogged sediments at or near the ground surface, they lose their strength and response to strong shaking. So, in other words, if you were outside, you might be in, somewhere close to where liquefaction has happened. Tsunamis don't happen that often, she says, but they do happen, so they should be considered serious. Now, I know we'll talk about lists of things that we will need later in our go bags and our grab bags, or the bags that we leave packed at home to be able to survive in the event of an emergency. But right here is where it was suggested that if you had a pair of boots or a pair of shoes and flashlight under your bed, so that if you had to get up from what might have been a small earthquake and there was debris, you wouldn't be walking bare feet. And it happens that there was someone in one of our workshops who experienced this. She experienced it in Japan. So she knew exactly what we were talking about, because it apparently happened more often there than, some of us ever thought. And having the footwear to at least keep your feet safe so that you can figure out your path was a good idea. The explanation of drop, cover, hole, as I sort of mentioned before, you take cover underneath a piece of sturdy furniture, cover your neck and your head with your arms. If you're nowhere near a piece of heavy furniture, and I'm looking in my own home right now, there's nothing I could hide under. Just nothing is high enough for me to get under. So, you can get into the corner of an interior wall and try to stay safe there. So if you're driving, pull somewhere safe and stay in the car. Now, we talked about cell phone use during an earthquake, or to me, this apparently would apply to any emergency. Try not to use your cell phone to call people. It would, probably overload circuits that may otherwise be needed for emergency responders to be able to get to where they need to go. Apparently, texting is okay. And in your plan that you will create at some point, you would have that one or two people where you would text and say, this happened, but I'm okay. And those are just the kinds of messages that you would want to get across. So although it would be very tempting to use your phone to call someone, try to prevent that if you can, because we want everyone who needs help to be able to get it. And of course, your contact people should probably be, they suggest that at least one of those should be an out of province person, a family member, or someone that you would trust with this information, just because chances are, if all your friends live in Vancouver and there's an earthquake there, they're all in the same boat you are. So letting them know you're safe is okay, but at least if you want to be able to reach someone who is not in the same situation as you, that would be the thing to do, is to have someone that you would contact away from you. So that was pretty much our first workshop. And as I said, our presenter offered a lot more information about earthquakes. She was very precise about certain things. She had data, that she could offer, but I am not an expert, so I'll let you read all about that when you get there. Our second workshop concentrated on emergency management and climate readiness. Now that's probably different. Climates where we live are different for certain people, although with the climate change nowadays, it's pretty hard to tell how good a winter you're going to have and how severe is it going to be. What are the summers like? Do fires only happen in the summer? Do floods? Well, we never expect that bad floods are going to happen if we don't live in an area where we could have landslides or anything, but you just never know. So this presenter's, she was from the provincial government, and her presentation dealt with know your hazards. In BC, she said there were 10 hazards primary hazards to consider. And they were floods, wildfires, earthquakes, tsunamis, disease outbreaks, such as COVID, of course, severe weather, power outages, landslides, avalanches, and hazard spills. Now, I think those probably apply in many of the provinces we live in. So no matter where you're from, consider any of those that might happen and how you would deal with them if they did. And the tools, she said, that you could use to determine, if you are at risk. You call your government office or your First Nation office to try and find out what they would consider higher risks for you in the area where you live. And you need to know where to find high ground if necessary, for instance, or whatever would keep you as safe as possible. So again, this is where I say it is everyone's responsibility to figure out, where would I call my municipality, city hall, wherever it is that they might have a program that might help. That's what you need to do. So securing your environment, as we went over a little bit, to do it. She called it a hazard hunt, and she would involve her children in trying to help out as well. And this way they would learn about emergency preparedness. So I sort of imagine myself, even though there's just you and your spouse, don't be the one doing it all, because your spouse also needs to know what they would do in an event of an emergency. Make it a family sort of obligation's the only word I can come up with right now, but a family thing, so that everyone has an idea what type of hazards you would find and try to eliminate them, or just make sure that you could cope if these things happen. So removing items from high shelves, securing things on walls that are not currently very secure. So if you got a nice big picture hanging over your bed, it's got glass in front of it, and now the walls are going to shake, you're in that bed, and that picture is going to fall. In your kitchen cupboards. And I'm preaching this and I'm still thinking about my cupboards, and there are things that are heavy at the top, and primarily because sometimes we put things up there that we don't use very much, but maybe they shouldn't be there. They should be down in the lower cupboards, because as we said, cupboard doors can open, things will fall out. And so securing them or moving them to another area, it sounds easy, but it's not. And we all understand that. So do the best you can to keep yourself safe in your own home. Gather your supplies, and we will get to the supply list that we compiled over the year-long project that we did. We gathered the supply list from several resources that we found online so that you wouldn't have to go to all of those to figure out, how do I pack for my guide dog? How do I prepare for that? What will he or she need? How do I pack for a family of 4? Or, here we're not concerned about floods, but we're concerned about winter storms. What do I pack in this bin to be ready? We'll go over that list. It is very lengthy. We won't talk about everything, but you'll be able to have a look at that. I will include that as one of the documents that we put together, and it's also on the AEBC website. So in the event of an emergency, we were told that you may have a grab and go kit in your home, somewhere close to a front door, closet, or somewhere very convenient that you can grab it without having to dig out, 3 suitcases and boxes or clothes or whatever. You should be prepared. If you are a family that has a vehicle, you should have a bag in there, some resources to keep you warm if you're stuck in the car and it's cold. Some food, if you happen to be there for a lengthy period of time, you'll be hungry, you'll need water. You should have, although many workplaces, I know my employer did, but only because I worked for the federal government, we had this huge bin that every 6 months or whenever they said to do it, we would go through it and, try to replace items as they became expired. But so your employer may have some resources or, some items put away somewhere in case of emergencies, but it's always best to look after ourselves just so that we have what we need. So if you're someone who takes medication, for instance, you may want to have a little supply there or in any other bag, so that if you're stuck for 3 days without being able to go anywhere or call for help, you have the things that you need. Something that kind of caught my attention when we were in the wildfire situation 2 summers ago. One of our workshop attendees actually spoke up and said, I'm a diabetic and my medication only gets delivered to me for 10 days at a time. That's the way it's set up. That's the way things are done. And so not only was the suggestion that, well, now the pharmacy surely would let you have more, but the pharmacy didn't have any more. They were running out of supplies as well. And there was no way to, the planes weren't flying. The weather conditions are, not good. There's too much smoke. You couldn't get through the highway because, again, the visibility was not good. So everything was closed. There are some tough decisions, I suppose, that need to be made sometimes when you're trying to get your supplies together, and how will you manage that? Not everyone is in a position where they could put away some medication that might be very expensive for a few days that you may or may not use at the time. And this is why we encourage everyone to keep their kits wherever they are, in your car, at your place of work, or in your home, updated every 6 months. We just want you to look through them and think, what is in here that really, if I had to use it 3 months from now, I couldn't because it will have expired too long, then you switch them over. You just have to kind of keep rolling it over to make sure that everything you have in there will be fit to use if and when the situation arises. Not all emergencies will require you to leave your home, so you need to be as prepared if you need to stay at home than if you need to go to an evacuation center. And the idea is that you should be prepared for at least 2 weeks, especially, if you had to stay at home and you couldn't go anywhere else. Just remember that there could be restrictions such as no electricity. This means no internet, no cooking or heat, etc. Would you have enough supplies to survive? So canned food or perishable, non-perishables. And please don't forget the can opener to put in your bag or bin, because if you can't open that can of food, you'll be stuck. At this point, I just want to say that the emergency kits we were able to provide all participants when we did the workshop, they were 72 hours worth of supplies, apparently, for one person only. If you were stuck, you would at least have those nice little bars. Apparently, they don't taste that bad. Laura was good for when we had the second workshop. She went through the whole bag and she tasted everything that was, the bars that were in there and the water, to be able to show you that, or to show us that the food that was in there was okay to eat. The water did not taste that good, but she said, how good could water taste when it came out of her bag? And apparently the lifespan of that bag of water was 5 years. So it must be treated with enough preservative that it would last that long. But should you be in a situation where you're desperate, it was doable. So the supplies you'll keep at home could range from anything to stay well fed, hydrated, to be able to water. What if the water's cut off? I mean, this happened to a lot of people when there were wildfires around our place. If water was turned off in certain places so that the fire fighters were wanting water somewhere else, I don't have all the particular details, but at some point you may not have water, so you need to be able to also keep clean and keep things clean. We talked a little bit about not only to keep you healthy and keep you safe, but to keep you occupied as well. Some people have children at home. What will they be doing during all this time while we're all worried about how long this emergency is going to last? So, games you could play, a favorite food that someone would eat, and just so that you can be as comfortable as possible for however long you'll need to be staying in your home during the state of emergency. And what happens if you are not at home? The idea is to, get away from hazardous buildings, obviously. And if you had to, if you were in a position where the emergency was very severe and you were outside and you don't know how to, remember we talked about drop, cover, and hold. The idea is that you try to protect your vital organs as much as possible so that, you prevent as much damage as you can. The idea is to stay where you are at the time and try to protect yourself as good as you can. And I'll let you read about the rest so that you have more ideas as to what you might do. You know, I understand while I'm trying to explain this to all of you, none of this would ever be easy, especially if you couldn't see anything at all. I even can't imagine it. I have a little bit of sight and I could at least see, you know, where it's dark, where it's light. I could see debris, maybe not all of it, but you need to think about how you would handle yourself in that event and the best way that you can figure out how to protect yourself. The issue of your insurance policy that covers your home insurance became a big conversation as well. You need to be absolutely sure of what your insurance would or would not cover. Maybe that might prompt you into to make a few changes if you thought you needed it, and find out exactly what you would do, how you proceed with in the event of an emergency, because we also found out during that one summer that not every insurance company is nice. How they deal with emergencies, they're not all as helpful as you think. Um, you know, they probably think they do their best, but when you're stuck in a situation where now your home's not fit to live in, you didn't have time to get the things you needed and you can't, and you don't have the resources to just, you know, go everywhere with your credit card to charge it, not, and especially if you don't know when you're going to get any of this money back or whatever, you need to know, you need to be prepared how to deal with how you would handle things with the insurance company and how they will be able to help you or not. They talk about it's important to inquire from the disaster centers how they will be able to help you. Some welcome pets. Of course, they will welcome a guide dog, but some welcome pets and some do not. So in that situation, you would have in your plan, what will I do with my pet if, you know, we're told that we may need to evacuate at some point, or we're in that alert stage where, you know, someone could knock on the door in a minute and say you have 10 minutes to leave or whatever. You need to have those things planned out so that you're not stuck somewhere, not being able to bring your pet into the disaster center to get help. All of this is in the plan that we will go over afterwards. Heat domes. So, you know, while we're afraid of being too cold, we're also afraid of the heat because it can bring about a lot of problems for some people. And of course, the extreme months that you would be concerned are June, July, and August in most places. You need to be on the lookout when it gets too hot for heat exhaustion and heat strokes. Maybe hotter inside your home than it is outside. So you have to think about that too. Some people might need to leave their home to get to a cooler place. You know, some people are at higher risk for heat strokes or heat exhaustion, such as seniors, people with disabilities, people with pre-existing conditions, people who use certain medications or drugs. And, you know, you have to think about young children and how they will fare in the heat. Helpful to have an air conditioner, but we all know that not every home is equipped with that system or with an air conditioning unit. If you don't have, you know, in the reading that you will do in the documentation I'll give you, it'll give you tips on how to keep cool. Now, just to let you know, in provinces like BC, the government has a program where they have air conditioning units that they will provide, providing you qualify financially. It's a whole thing, and I'll let you learn about that as you read the documentation. So I'm wondering, do other provinces have that? And, you know, so that's a question you might want to ask yourself. I'd be curious to know too. Drink lots of water to stay hydrated. There, again, in the Vancouver, in the Metro Vancouver area, I know last year they did, I don't know if they do it every year, they were handing out cooling kits for free. So maybe the area you live in might have that. Maybe you just don't know. You've never asked anybody. Ask. It's not a silly question. You never know. Sometimes they advertise these things in places where you might not be aware of. You don't go and read on those sites. So, do they hand out cooling packs? You can buy any of those things, I know, in grocery stores and general stores, but if if your municipality was offering them, why not take advantage of that? Did you know that pet stores now sell cool shirts for pets? They can be soaked in water. You put them in the fridge and then you put that on your dog and they'll stay nice and cool. I thought that was kind of fun. You would, of course, make sure the pavement's not too hot. All of you with guide dogs would know all of these things. But for some of us who have pets, sometimes we may not think about that. If you live alone, make sure that a friend or a neighbor checks up on you just to make sure that you are okay. You may want to set up something where, if you know your neighbor has air conditioning in their home, that you might want to visit for a little bit to keep cool. There's also different centers that would be able to provide an area where people can just go to stay cool during the day or certain hours of the day. I know we have those in Kelowna, whether it's the mall or whether it's a particular place where there's just a lot of room where people can kind of congregate and stay cool for a little while. Then they can go back home and be a little more comfortable when the heat has gone, the sun's gone down, or it's not quite as hot. So now winter storms go from one extreme to another. They can bring high winds, cold temperatures, icy sidewalks, icy roads. Transportation conditions become a problem. And if there are power outages, that's another issue again. Falls are more common during icy conditions, so you want to have good footwear if you can to be able to prevent some of that, but it may not always be possible. Keep your home warm by closing windows and doors, turning up the heat. You can use space heaters, but never leave them unattended. Keep a fully charged portable charger for charging your mobile phone. As I said, if we run out of power, many things will become inaccessible to us, because while we're used to using our phone all day long, when it runs out of battery and you have nothing else charged, you won't be able to use it. And I shouldn't need to tell you, but we were told, do not use outside appliances such as barbecues in the house. Be sure your carbon monoxide detector is functioning. And here again, another program in BC that popped up and I didn't know about when we had the presentation is, do you have a Snow Angel program where you live? A Snow Angel program in Vancouver is a program which is run by, well, I suppose the city takes care of making sure the program gets in place with volunteers. So a volunteer would come and shovel your sidewalk or the entrance to your home, your steps, to make sure that you can get out okay. Even, there are people who can drive in the snow maybe, but if you're not able to shovel the snow around your car, that might be a problem. So if there is such a program, you may want to apply for it and see if you can get a little help. If you don't know of such a program, maybe it exists and no one's ever told you. I didn't know. The city of Vancouver also has an app called Alertable. It gives you notices about heat domes and other types of emergencies. And apparently, you know, it's quite helpful to those who use it. So does your area have such an app that you might be able to download on your iPhone to, get at least the alerts that this thing is happening? Then you can go look on the government websites for more information, or listen to the radio for more news, or social media is also another outlet where you find out a lot of information. I know when we were in a situation where we all evacuated for so many days, our where I live, in the area where I live, it we have a neighborhood page on Facebook, and people were communicating through there, um, as to the conditions, the things that were going on around our neighborhood. Many of us, I suspect the majority of us, have cameras around our house, and it was so good to be able to keep in touch with, 2 streets down from me. There's no way that, they can return to their homes, or everything looks safe. We didn't have to worry. In some cases, we could see the firefighters in our backyards. They were laying down more um, sprinklers, or trying to make sure that some trees didn't catch on fire, that kind of thing. So social media can be used for good. Um, all provinces have a plan in place, I'm pretty sure, or territories. You just need to be able to access where they put that information. And again, I did find that one document that gave me a link to every province and every territory. So I will share that with you. What happens after you dial that phone number or whatever, or go to that link? I did try a couple and they seem to work. So, it's also our responsibility to make sure that if something isn't quite up to date, or there's information that you want that they haven't posted, although I noticed that most of them were pretty much um, up to date, then you need to call them and let them know. I noticed that, your information is dated last summer, for instance. Could you tell me, is there another site that I go to find out more? Um, so I will stop at this point to see if there are any questions.
So far, no hands.
Well, I'm either doing a good job or I've put you all to sleep, except for Marcy. Okay, well, just remember from this point on, if you do have a question, raise your hand or let us know, and we will stop and try to answer your question. So the next part takes me into the emergency plan. I just want to give you a quick glimpse at what that's going to look like. It's a lengthy enough document, but as I say, some of these things won't apply to you. So you can just delete them from your plan or add the ones that we maybe didn't think about, but everyone's situation is unique. You should try to update your emergency plan every 6 months, maybe, or every 12 months at least, so that you want to make sure that your plan is up to date and that you have the correct information when you need it. You could set a calendar alert on your phone, or try to find some way to alert yourself that that's going to be needed. So Section A dealt with household members. So who are your household members? You would want to note their phone numbers, so their cell numbers if they have one, their health information such as health card number, an email address. And so we have enough for 4 members there. So as I say, if there's only 2 of you or 1 of you, delete the other 3, and then the amount of room that your plan will need will be a little shorter. So your home information is in the next section, your home address, home insurance provider, phone number, policy expiry date, name and phone number of home security system, last time you checked your smoke detector batteries, carbon monoxide detectors as well. Here's one I wonder how many of you have. Do you have a fire extinguisher in your home? Where is it if you have one? Do you know? You can, there's room enough for a couple in there. I know that it's often recommended you keep them under the sink in the kitchen. That's where mine is. Never had to use it. And it's funny, my daughter and I were talking about that the other day. Would I know how to use one? Or she doesn't know either. None of us have ever had to use one. So I told her that when this one is expired, we should just test it out to see if we can manage it, because I believe there's a little pin or something that you need to kind of break off to get the thing to spray. But again, don't take my word for it. Those are things you need to be able to do for yourself when that happens. I won't be there. Do you know where your electrical panel is in your house? Should you need to restart a breaker, or do you, heaven forbid, if you're still working with fuses, do you have enough of those on hand that you could replace some? Now, do you know where to shut off your water? The main water shut-off valve? Hot water tank location, the same? Or heat pump? Or for, your furnace, do you know where all of that is if you are in a house? So you would then note the phone numbers of any utility companies so that you could give them a call and see what's going on. And if they can't come and fix it, if you haven't, got an alert that this is going to be going on for a long time, they'll at least be able to tell you your whole neighborhood's affected. It'll take us, 1 day or 6 hours or something like that. Now, here's an interesting spot that I want to stop at. And the presenter at this time told us, although we were told in one of the focus groups that someone had been told by a firefighter how to shut off the gas in your home. And we received contradictory information from the presenter that we had, saying you should never turn off the gas. I mean, if the situation has become dangerous enough that you think the gas is a problem, you should probably leave. But if you turn off the gas and tomorrow you need it back on, the people who do this sort of thing, to turn on the gas is not something you can do yourself. You need someone who has experience or works in that area to be able to do that. And they may be very busy attending to whatever emergency is going on, and they won't be able to just come to your home to turn on the gas because you turned it off. So at this point, I would say I would go with the presenter. If you have any doubts about that, ask someone in your municipality. They would have that sort of information, or go look on the website to see if they offer anything to do with that. But we were definitely told that turning off the gas is not something you want to do, because you can't turn it back on. And how long will it be before you have it back on so that your furnace can work again, your fireplace, or your stove, because your stove is gas. So just don't touch that part. The emergency plan also talks about the day of the last fire drill that you had. Now, I can't imagine, I'm pretty sure most households don't do this, but your children do it in school, we do it at work. Why wouldn't we do it in our home? It doesn't have to be so military-like, but at least you would have an idea where to go once you leave the front door of your house. So we suggested a cold day fire drill and a warm day fire drill. So if there's snowbanks everywhere, that might be looking different than if you're going out into the hot sun in bare feet. Okay. The day of the last earthquake drill. So, again, that's your choice. If you think you or your family is prepared to know what to do, then just kind of note that, and finding a place where you would meet outside once you're out. I know when I lived in one of the condo buildings I lived in, we had a good emergency plan where on every floor, there were 4 floors. On every floor, there was what they called a fire warden. So someone had volunteered, one of the owners, to be the fire warden, and they would knock on every door on their floor to make sure everyone was out, or they needed help, then they could get that. But then when we got outside, we had a specific place where we were to meet, and someone would take stock of who's in the building, who's not, who might be left behind, and so on. I understand that a few people that came to our workshops were hoping that they would sort of try to institute that in the buildings they live in. They've never had any emergency planning that way, and they thought it was a good idea. So, we provided the presenters information, of course, from BC, so you would do the same in your area and ask them to go and present to your strata or, whatever situation you live in, so that, they weren't just taking your word for it. They've got someone who works in that type of thing every day, and someone who has all the information they need to be able to pass it on to others. So now we come to people willing to help in an emergency. So how well do you know your neighbors? It's recommended that we should have at least 4 neighbors, but maybe 1 or 2 would be enough, where they would check on you or make sure that you got out okay if there was an emergency. You also have to plan in the event maybe they're not home, but this is why you want to plan on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how well you know your neighbors, that they would look out for you. I've been in situations here at home where I think, if something happened, both the cars that my daughter and son-in-law drive are in the driveway. They're not even in the garage. They're visible in the driveway at this time. And if there was an evacuation, people probably think that I'm okay because one of those will drive me somewhere. But in fact, I'm alone with the dog. So I need to be able to either call someone, at least know how to contact someone and say, hey, I am here. The cars are here, but no one else is home. I need help. So you would want to note their address and phone numbers. So then we talked about you might want to put their email addresses there, although in an emergency, I'm not going to send you an email, just, to see if you can help me, because that's not going to be terribly fast. My emergency contact who lives outside of my area. So for instance, if there was an emergency here and I had Diana Brent as a contact who lives in Calgary, that would be okay, because at least she's not in that same emergency I am. And she knows that at least we could communicate, so she would know that I'm all right. So a family member, a good friend, doesn't matter. Then again, the name and contact information of someone who would care for your guide dog or a pet. Some people told us that they would prefer not to have their guide dogs in the event of an emergency with them, because that may be more dangerous for them than it is for the person. And that's up to you. That's something you need to work out for yourself, whether your dog would, be traumatized by whatever's going on. And I can kind of see that. I'm trying to imagine walking into a disaster center where there's 3,000 people trying to figure out where they're going to get help, and you're there with your dog, although they're welcome and there would be an area where you could go to stay safe. That may not work for your particular dog. So think about that. So the section D deals with meeting places in case of an evacuation. Where would you meet? Would you meet at the mall, your local restaurant where you're used to going? It has to be a safe location outside your neighborhood, I would think. So there again, I'm thinking about all of us who don't drive, and if we happen to be alone, how do we get to where we're going to go? Many on the survey said, oh, I could just take a bus, I could just take, a taxi. Well, that may not be possible, depending on what the road situation is like. When we were faced with evacuating here, the roads were blocked with traffic. And I mean, we can get to the mall within less than, I would say, let's say 10 minutes to get to the mall driving from where we live. It took my daughter an hour to meet her sister to get to that place. There are so many people who are just on the road looking on to see that the fire was coming closer and closer. They were told to go home. Then there's all the neighborhood that's trying to evacuate all at the same time. It creates a grid. And so think about how you're going to get out. At least if you had a neighbor or someone in your area who was willing to take you with them, you'd at least be safe with that person. That's my suggestion. I think that's what I would do. Now they talk about finding out where the location of the disaster centers are and the directions, but here's the thing. That information is not always readily available at any time. Maybe closer to, when we expect wildfires to happen or that kind of thing, you might be able to get a municipality to tell you the disaster center is planned for such and such, and they'll post that on their website. But I was told in certain areas that the municipality does not always disclose that ahead of time. I'm not sure what their rationale is. You'd have to ask them. But in any case, once you find out the information, then you could put that in your plan if you think that that's going to be helpful at the time. But you may need to change that particular thing more often. School and work information. So I'll just kind of go quickly through that. You need to know where your children go to school, where they could be picked up if you're not the one who's able to do that, who's going to be able to do that. Same with your work. Just to note place of work and the contact information. Then we talk about accommodation needs. If you are a person with a disability, is there, what is it that you might need? There are people who, would have mobility challenges, or people who have all kinds of accommodations that we may not think about that would be helpful at the time. And it's not for, someone trying to help you to try and just figure that out. They've never met you before. If it's written in your plan, they'll understand, this is someone who, really needs to be, better oriented in their situation or whatever it is. So if you just make a few notes in your plan, the person trying to help you would be at a better advantage. Note your extended health insurance if you have any of that and the information you could access. Allergies, medical conditions, and what you would do in any scenario, what type of medication you would need. Location of emergency supplies. So I'm kind of laughing a little bit here. I'm kind of chuckling because if I write down where I put my kit and I can't find the kit, I won't be able to read the plan. Well, then that means you may need an extra copy of the plan somewhere else other than just your kit, because you could put your plan in your kit so you have all that information there. But somewhere else you might want to also have a copy of that plan so you can say, oh, last year I moved it from the front hall closet to this cupboard. and, at least you would have that fairly quickly. You want to make sure you know where any specialized equipment is that you might need for anyone to help you. So in other words, if you needed a walker, a cane, or any other thing that a CPAP machine, doesn't matter. Someone helping you would know where to find that if you weren't able to do it for yourself. And check the last date of your emergency supplies. So, it's pretty well equipped with a lot of things that you would need. You want to know how to contact the fire hall, the poison control there. So we've listed, a few little things, your veterinarian, in case your pet got hurt, or your guide dog. We've listed so many things that may or may not apply to you. Again, go through it, see what we may have forgotten, and create the plan that works best for you. Any questions?
Monique, okay, Monique is first.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for a shout out for the presentation. Participated in one, that one already, but it's always something to remind a few things we should do and we don't. The problem we have sometimes, yeah, we can have neighbor, but when you call the city or government, most of the time now we have voicemail. And I know it gets through the code 311. That's it. There's no really phone number we can call, and we don't know even with our health system we have, and I'm sure it's all province. We don't know who to contact. And I remember when around the year 2000 when it started like that, the municipality had a list of people with disability who wanted to be registered. But now after a while they decided, who did it, I don't remember, to remove this list. And I think there's something they should have, when especially when an emergency is coming, at least we have somebody we can call, or we can contact with the name and the phone number, the person who is responsible. But the change we have and the moving stuff we have these days is very hard to have. We can make our plan, but we don't have a name of a person. What do you do?
It's very difficult, and also that the fact that every province works differently, although you would think that, there would be a basic quality of system that would answer most people's questions. And I know that, and maybe there are some on the call here today that could tell me, it's my understanding that in BC, I think some of the fire halls actually do keep a list. So in your neighborhood, I believe that you can identify as a person with a disability. I'm not sure if it extends right to a 911 call. I've never taken advantage of any of that, so I'm not the best person to speak to, but certainly we could find out that kind of information later, who does it and who doesn't, and why it's been adopted so well in certain areas and not others. But also during the research that we did, I remember our project manager calling City Hall at one point in Vancouver, and she wanted to know the directions, or where this particular center was, probably a disaster center, and it had already been listed as such. And the person on the phone just wouldn't cooperate. She actually had the map right in front of her, and she basically told her, I can see that, but you can look it up on a map. So they have absolutely no idea how to help a blind person. And that's part of the problem. And this is where I think that we probably need to do some educating there. And, there are so many things in our lives that we're trying to educate about, but my goodness, this is one of the things that probably we should do more of. And it's a shame that we weren't able to get the financial assistance that we applied for to do this project on a larger scale, because I think it would be very useful. I think the problem is that government thinks that they've done a good job by providing so many links to a website, or like I said, I don't know what will happen if I phone this phone number or that phone number, but giving out, direct lines to some help when you need it, that seems to be getting away from us. And so whether we can reinstitute the place where you could register as a person with disabilities in your area, Monique, I don't know. We need to find out who the best person
I'm
is.
gonna answer your question because it's a question I asked for different to the municipality or even the health system, but nobody is able to answer to that. I'm gonna come back with that question for sure. But right now, with the reform we have and probably other provinces too, nobody was able to answer this question. And
Yeah,
and it's a problem. I'm sure what I'm describing now it's the same situation probably from other cities, other province. That's why I don't know, we shouldn't have a fair financial organization between our province to have the same thing, or but the difference is from province to province. Health system is managed by the province, and that's why you see we have a good initiative, but somebody decided no, we won't do it anymore. We don't have the people. They have a list of organization, but like I know, like some community groups, sometimes they're not their home, they're not who's gonna reach. They change staff.
yeah,
Is the
yeah.
same situation, but I think province and municipality has a responsibility to do something. Thank you.
And you're welcome. They think they've done it, I think. And like I said before, it seems to me since probably 2022, I've seen a lot more information online after we started this, thinking about this project. There is a lot of information there, but it's so scattered. Some of them have videos where, they're showing you things, but they're not verbalizing. So all these people think they've done a good job. They've got the shell. They have the principal thing, what they were supposed to do, but they've forgotten that some of us can't see
Yeah.
and would need more help to manage. So maybe we can try with ABC, I don't know, to see if we can, research a little further. Maybe there's other avenues we can apply for funding. I have no idea at this time, but I'm happy to offer at least what I know, and hopefully that people would take it upon themselves to try and help themselves a little more in the areas where they live.
Thank you,
Anyone
Monique.
else?
And Diana.
Okay. It's 2 or 3 things. First of all, if people are looking for the raise hand button, today I found it on my iPhone under reactions. And sometimes I see it in other places, but that's where it is now if you're looking for it. The other thing is, I know for a fact that Alberta has an emergency system that alerts your cell phones, as Chantal mentioned, the BC one does. And I kind of have a feeling the provinces are kind of connected, because I've heard sometimes on the radio where they say we're testing it in this area now and another one at another time. So I kind of think they're connected, but I can't say that for certain. The third thing I was just going to mention is knowing if a person isn't giving you the information you need, like telling you to look at a map, other than saying you can't look at the map, at least ask them for an address, so that if that person isn't helpful, at least you can go to someone else, like a friend or whatever, and say, this is the address. And then at least they should be able to get that from a map. if they can't understand how to give you specific information. And I know the address won't necessarily tell you how to get there, but at least it's giving you more information.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I'm not sure what the rationale is for those who don't want to display the information too much ahead of time about disaster centers. I'm not too sure. I could probably go back to some notes and figure out why, but I think at least they should understand that we have to plan a little further than some. I mean, if I were a person who could see to drive a car today, someone says you need to get out of your house now. I get in my car and start driving where all the other cars are going, and I should be able to get to somewhere. But if you're someone who's blind and have not had the opportunity to plan, I need to find out if my neighbor can take me. Is the bus working? Can I get on a SkyTrain, or do I go on the metro? What do I do? It's difficult, and it's much like a lot of other things in our lives. Blind people are kind of forgotten about or skimmed over, in my opinion. They assume we have someone who's going to be able to help us. They assume somebody will come and rescue us. And just as I think of it now, I mean, most of us would hope that if there was a fire in the building you were living in, whether it's a condo, an apartment, or whatever, you're hoping that when the fire department comes, if you're still stuck in your house, they'll go find you. That's not their first priority. I hate to tell you, the first priority is for them to put the fire out. Yes, if they know they've got that under control, they will definitely look out for someone who may be stuck, or if they have that information. But if they don't know that you're there, their first priority is to put out that fire. So this is why it's important for all of us to have a plan.
My last final comment is, if you have access to somebody with a car, impress upon them the importance of keeping the gas tank half full or more, I would say full, as opposed to living on half empty. Because if you have to get out, and I know this was the problem when there was the big fire in Fort McMurray, when everybody was leaving and everybody was stuck, people had to have their cars running for a long time to get out of where they needed to be. And if they didn't have enough gas in their car, they were stuck. So even if you don't drive, if you've got money to get somebody, just keep impressing on whoever your driver is, make sure your car is full.
And also, for them to have a little bit of supplies in their car. If you're stuck somewhere in hard weather, you want to have blankets, you want to have something you might be able to drink or eat. There's so many things that you could look after. And I know that, a lot of people would say, oh, there's not room for that, or, how do I keep this updated all the time? I can't afford that. Just do your best to try and protect yourself as best you can. I know a lot of us don't like to use candles, and fair enough. But if you were somewhere where it was very cold and that candle could keep you a little bit warm, you find one that would be safer, something big, not something flimsy that's going to fall over, that kind of thing. It's just the best way that you can prepare for yourself is at least one step in the right direction. Anyone else?
No. Oh, sorry, Pat. You snuck in on me.
A while ago. One of the things that I'm thinking of is that obviously this has created some thinking as far as all of us who are here in AEBC. And I'm thinking that really a proactive thing for us to do would be to, in order to continue some of this work, because we don't want to be in a disaster, I would like to know, for instance, all of the people who are here in Ontario. Can we start a discussion about Ontario or different areas? All of the people who are in Quebec. Can we start a discussion about, do you know what I mean? Because I think that is going to be the saving grace, because like you said, the cities are not going to do it. And, you know, it's not going to come from the government. They feel that they are completely prepared and so on and so forth. So it really becomes our responsibility to do something about it.
Well, even during the National Awareness, Emergency Awareness Week, that's usually in June.
Right.
Laura and I attended. Laura was our project manager, and when we attended that particular session, there were videos shown, nonverbal. There was a lot of communication with slides and things that, were not set up for blind people. So right there, they're trying to get us to attend the session that isn't accessible.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show that we have to be so proactive in making sure that we're heard and that we have things that work for us. It's a shame that we weren't able to get the funding, and there's a reason why the government offered funding to promote emergency preparedness. It's because it's needed. They offered a lot of money. We just didn't, we weren't successful in our application, and I'm sure we weren't the only ones. So either we need to look elsewhere to continue this conversation and to continue updating, because as we know, protocols do change. And, we have more technology today that can be helpful. We have, with, the right place on your iPhone, I can find out about you, who your doctor is, where you live, what, things you're allergic to, what medication you take. Whereas before, someone needed to find your medication so they could read the prescriptions, or they needed to go look on the fridge where you had a list of your allergies. And, this way, everything is all in one place. And that's one of the things that we tried to stress.
Well, thank you for pulling all of this information together. And I really hope that those in well, because I know I want to start something in Ontario and start to make emergency preparedness a thing in Northern Ontario. Not Ontario is so wide. So, if anybody would like to contact me, that would be fine.
Well, anything that, we can do to help, just let us know. I'm noticing the time, and I thought at first I would have a little bit of trouble filling up my time, but I still had a whole supply list to go through and all of that, which I don't have to do. If you'd rather we didn't, I will definitely include all the documents in an email to you, those of you who are here, that would give you an idea what you would put in a grab and go bag, or in a bin that you would keep in your home. Something you would keep in your car, or something that you would keep at work.
So we have one person with a hand up, and we have Sue McAndrew who unmuted. So Susan, did you want to say something, or?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so
was
Susan first and then Robert, if you want to take those two instead,
I'm good with that.
Chantal, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a situation last year where for some reason there was a bit of a crash, and a picture fell off the wall and smashed.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to phone Be My Eyes because I was barefoot, and they told me to grab a piece of the frame that had broken and sweep my way to a path where I could get to the door. And
Mm-hmm.
and I used to have a medical thing on the door, very high, that had a code so that they could unlock the door if necessary, in case anyone that was there was unconscious or whatever. But we went to test it last week because I was with some friends in the building, and they'd say, we'd like to know if we could get in if there was a problem. And apparently I didn't know that the device had been disconnected. You were supposed to dial in a 4 code and the door would open. But in doing some repairs or different things that were going on, that system wasn't working. So I would suggest that anyone that sort of has a system that might be connected to the fire department or the ambulance, either get that system so that someone can get into your place, or else if you already have such a device, make sure it's connected, because I was rather shocked that it didn't work, because they said, well, what if you couldn't get to the door? And I suggested to them, well, I think everyone should have a device like that if they're a senior or have a disability. But
Yeah,
it's just a food for thought. I thought this thing worked,
Yep.
and they just wanted to check if it worked. And apparently, if you dialed in the 4 numbers that were supposed to be a code, nothing
Mhm.
happened because it wasn't plugged in. So make sure any safety device that we have, if necessary, is still working.
Yep, and the same with, if you live in a strata situation, the smoke alarms and such are tested sometimes, some buildings twice a year by the fire department. But if you
Yep,
live
they
in
are
your
here.
own, if you live in your own separate home, you don't know that the fire alarms are not working because, or the detectors rather, because you haven't had to use one. So, and you haven't been changing the batteries. At some point, hopefully usually some of them, they'll beep when the batteries are running low. But what if that didn't happen, or you're way past that? So all those things need to be kept up to date. Make sure that all is in good working order. Yeah. And
Robert.
Robert?
Yeah, I would comment on all this. We live in a co-op, and we have our equipment tested and repaired if necessary. Every year they come by and they check it, all our equipment, the fire and smoke detectors, and they'll take stuff,
Even our
extinguishers as well, and they check everything, and if they need to replace them, or we replace them. So we actually have it. The other thing I was going to suggest, I know we're talking about emergencies, but even non-emergency things, like I know in our building a couple of times they've had to turn off our water for the day, and because of maintenance, whatever. And we always said what we'll do is we'll go out for the day if we can, and usually it's been pretty good. We've gone maybe to the mall, or we had to meet somebody, or at one point this year it was it was camp, and our friend came back, and we said to David, we said, we have to leave the building because there's no water for the day, because they had to replace a pipe. So we just met at the mall, and I know it's maybe not quite an emergency, but it could be inconvenient if you need water and you don't have it.
Yeah. All these things that, there's just, the insurance companies, I think now are mandating that all this equipment be tested, and otherwise the strata would probably have problems getting insurance. I know that there's a lot that's attached to insurance nowadays, and that's why it's so expensive. There's so many things that happen that they end up responsible for, and so if we can try and mitigate some of that, that helps us in the long run.
Also, another comment I have, it's Troy, by the way, but I've been listening with Rob. That we have in the co-op, like we have a few units that have people that are disabled and or seniors. That is kept, there is a record of that in the office. And there is also a couple of board members who have that information in there, probably in their unit. So they go to check on us every so often, and they even just all their neighbors, just as long as they say hi to you And if there is a
Mhm.
problem, they'll not bang on your door and they'll help you.
Well,
Yeah.
like I say,
Something like that, but we have that, it was something drawn up a few years ago that we started doing that.
Mhm. Well, it's good to have a plan.
We do.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do.
We do. We have a plan.
You know, appreciative to get the kits. So if we have
Thank
to
you.
walk out, we have our own water, our own
There you go.
whatever.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
No, that's it.
Okay, well, I hope
Oh,
that,
sorry, Lisa.
Lisa,
Lisa unmuted. Are
Okay.
you unmuting to ask a question or? Lisa? Okay.
Broken.
okay. Well, if there are no more questions, I hope I have provided you with enough information to think about. Like I said, some of the notes I'll send you will have a little more meat to it, but things that I didn't really want to speak to because I'm not an expert. But if there's anything in the documents that I send you that you have questions on, I'd be happy to answer them. Just give me a shout, either by phone or by email or text, whatever works for you. And I hope that I've impressed upon you how important planning for emergencies really is. Because truly, when it does happen, I know, you can kind of stand there and think, oh, I knew how to do this, how to do that. But in the moment, it's alarming and can be confusing. And, you just want to be as prepared as possible. It's never going to be perfect. We all understand that. And, try to, to be prepared for yourself, but also remember that you may be someone who could be able to help other people as well. For instance, in the kits that we gave out, there's a flashlight in there. I know you don't need one maybe, but the person who's going to be helping you might. And, there are just a few little things like that you could do that will be helpful to others, because our intent is that we don't want to become more of a burden to the rest around us with a system that's already overworked and overextended. And so the more we can do to help ourselves, the better everyone will be for it.